Georgia here with you, aka VHS82 apostrophe, rolling on into episode number 7 of our Italy's Holocaust series. Those films from 1979 right up through 1994. And I think I mentioned on a previous one that I was sort of in between one and another. I decided to run with Absurd. It's been a while since I've seen it. This, of course, is Joe D'Amato directing a follow-up of sorts. We'll put that in singular quotes to his own 1980 semi-cult masterpiece. It's no masterpiece. I'm just saying. I do love it, man. Anthropophagus, man. Some superb island horror mayhem, right? I love that movie. Absurd, though, works on a completely different level. Absurd, of course, is the follow-up. Sort of sequel only in name, really. Not really a sequel, but potentially could have been part of an interesting trilogy. I'm not going to say it would have nowhere matched Fulci's Gates of Hell or Dario's Three Mothers, but it could have been its own weird, unique, had, I think, D'Amato just slowed down a moment and thought this thing through and really decided to work with Eastman on what could have been a potentially third piece that could have just been a loose trilogy, which is, from 88 films. You got Absurd. Now, I'm pretty sure, I did not look, and I should have, I apologize. But I'm almost sure Synops, maybe, somebody like that, just recently, I think, put out new releases of Anthropophagus and Absurd. I'm still writing the 88 release. A couple interviews on here with George Eastman, and one with him, and one, I think, with Michele Sauvé, maybe. He's in this. He's in, I think this is the first time he gets in here as an assistant director, maybe, I think. This might be Michele's first foray into filmmaking. I think. Pretty sure, maybe. It's he was asked if he would be part of a scene with a bunch of bikers driving around this drunk guy. And the question, of course, do you have your own motorcycle? I mean, so Italian filmmaking, man. Yeah, we'll give you the part, but you got to bring your own thing with you. Anyhow, so Absurd, 1981, a video nasty entry. It is, of course, in Jim Harper's Italian horror, although he does not have very kind words to this. And I take a bit of exception to a little bit. I mean, I've gone on and I read a few reviews, listened to a podcast, actually, Hysteria Continues cover this on their podcast. So plug in for Hysteria Continues, I guess. But he really did not, he was not too kind to this. Now, what do you have in Absurd? I mean, really, I watched the interview with George Eastman, and he, I think if I remember right, I think it was initially meant to be a more direct sequel, but I think ultimately the script needed to be rewritten because it was not a good script at all, period. And George Eastman ultimately ended up joining D'Amato, rejoining him on this project, but he rewrote the script, and the movie more or less stepped away from Anthropophagus, but he still reprises, as an antagonist, he reprises his role, George Eastman. So he, writes, and he's the main antagonist, Mikos. Really, I think that's his first name in Anthropophagus. But there's a little bit of a, and let you just look at that for a minute. There's a little bit of a history with this character. And by the way, too, another shameless plug-in, Video Nasties. If you don't know anything about that, volume 1 and 2 of this is outstanding. Thank you, David Lewin, for that. Anyways, there's a little bit of a weird background that is not taken advantage of at all, period. And that is, there is this research facility on this somewhere out in the Greek Isles. And for Absurd, George Eastman, his character Mikos has been biologically tested on. You're never really told exactly what is going on exactly. I think it's the type of that could enhance the ability to heal and all that jazz. And it's just stuff that the church, this guy who played by Purdom, who will be chasing after him. He's sort of our Dr. Loomis character, right? There is a huge tie-in to Halloween. I'll get into that in a second if I don't forget. But you got this this testing facility that somewhere between Anthropophagus and Absurd, somewhere back there in the mind of just all this stuff going on, there is this thing that could have actually been pushed into a third film and maybe given more explanation. Of course, it never does, never will. And so all we really know is this biological experiment gone wrong has gotten out of the facility. This priest slash, I guess, some sort of, I don't know if he's a doctor, but he is our protagonist, our Loomis character, who chases him into America. How does he even, I don't even know how that works, but eventually Mikos ends up in this small suburban neighborhood in America. And of course, you know, the priest, the Loomis, you know, right on his, you know, trail. And very quickly on and early in the film, he catches up with them, and as Mikos is trying to scale a fence, a steel pole fence, he falls on the spikes, I guess, and ends up just being gorged out and falls off on the other side. And so tries to make his way into a house, but eventually collapses, is taken to a hospital where the doctors and the nurses and all that, where a babysitter who is working as an assistant there in the room will be the main babysit. Belle's her last name. Annie Belle, who is the main babysitter, will leave the hospital, and eventually, I'm pretty sure when Mikos escapes the hospital, his and her past was somewhat cross, but he, I think, follows her to the house, and then of course he becomes the boogeyman that will terrorize her as she looks after a paraplegic daughter who is basically just strapped into this bed. And of course our little Tommy character, right, our little boy. This is cut right out of Halloween. But here's the interesting thing. This movie comes out in what? October, is released in October in 81. Halloween 2 is released in October 81. In this movie, I don't know how, either amazingly, this movie will, or Eastman will look forward to central ideas inherent in Hollywood, in Halloween, and they will push a few concepts forward that you will also see in Halloween 2. And so there's never been a substantiated, I don't think, no one's ever nailed down I don't know how you even know what's going on in Halloween 2 unless you're hearing rumors. Now, if you're D'Amato and you're a director, or Eastman, you got connections, maybe you're making phone calls, maybe someone's dropping some stuff on you. Maybe you're like, oh, that's where they're going. Interesting. We can do that. You know, so who knows how that happened, but if you watch Absurd and watch Halloween 2, it is strikingly amazing that you've got, you know, your main female lead ultimately is the daughter, Katya, in Absurd. And of course, you know, Laurie Strode in Halloween 2. They're both bedridden. They both open it up in a hospital. Of course, Halloween 2 stays in the hospital. The killer eventually leaves the hospital and makes his way to a house. So really, you almost have Halloween 2 inverted back into Halloween, which is kind of interesting. And, you know, so once he's there at the house, magically, genetically mutated, so his, you know, biologically just healed up, he is on the rampage, man. And between the hospital and there is gore to be had. There is a scene when he takes this guy, I don't know, it's like a meat packing plant or something. He just wanders in, his guy's sweeping up, just trying to clean up, and yeah, there's a bandsaw over here, and it's an amazing practical effect. But really, it's just laying this bloodbath. He'll run into Michele Sauvé as well and deal with him. And then he finally gets to the house. And once he gets to the house, then you have the whole Halloween setup, right? With the little boy is like, the boogeyman. But it's the first babysitter who's only there. See, mom and dad are going to go over to Fred's house and watch the Super Bowl and eat spaghetti like any good Italian-American would do, right? Filmed all in Rome, but it makes you think it all is in America. And it's always it's kind of interesting. So mom and dad are going, and so the first babysitter is told, and she does not get along with the boy at all. That there is an interesting tension there. That is very interesting. But before she's supposed to be there until the real babysitter gets there, who does have a great relationship with the boy, which the two just really, I mean, are opposite ends of things. It's interesting. The first babysitter will get a pick through the head, and a pickaxe through the head. Almost, you'll see this again in Stage Fright, right? At the beginning. Of course, George Eastman's attached to that as well. And so the first babysitter, now she gets to dispatch and placed somewhere in some room in the house. The other babysitter eventually gets there. And of course, the little kid is all freaked out about the boogeyman. And because the first babysitter said, if you don't be careful, the boogeyman's going to get you and eat you. And so it's sort of the inverted Laurie Strode, right? Like there's no such thing as a boogeyman. Well, there is a such thing as a boogeyman. And he has arrived, and he is about to terrorize this family to no end. Now, Jim Harper, one of the things that he says, and he's not the only one, but there is one of the big criticisms of D'Amato's effort here is like absolutely no suspense. Now, D'Amato really got his work done being behind the camera. He is a really good cinematographer. As an all-around director who strives to bring all the other aspects into filmmaking, I don't know if that was ever really supposed to be his forte. Anthropophagus works really extremely well. And eventually I will review that. But this is mainly just a pretty structurally sound film from beginning to end, done well, I think. It doesn't take its time with character and the writing, and it just doesn't take the time to be anything other than what it really ultimately is criticized to be, and that is just a copy of the American slasher. And this is nothing but a bunch of just kills, some very well done, I will say, and really just another Halloween ripoff. There is something interesting in here, though, that really does something unique. Aside from that backdrop info that I sort of dropped on you, the main girl, paraplegic girl, who's in the bedridden, she now is locked down, confined, right? But as the terror mounts in the house, and as Mikos really just starts to turn this house upside down, she races against time to basically, now some would look at it and go, please, okay, paraplegic, and you're just going to get yourself out of this thing so that you can do whatever it is you're going to do to protect your younger brother. But you know, the thing that hit me last night, you do have this thing called adrenaline and fear that can work potently together. There's stories abound of people lifting up cars, doing the most incredible things when adrenaline kicks into a maximum level, especially when terror is integrated into that. And I don't have a problem with this. I think it almost thinks, you know, so many times we talk about, oh, this movie's a metaphor on this, and it's a metaphor on that, and this is the metaphor working, and this is an analogy or an allegory, and all this junk. Here is a girl that, quite frankly, does not want to be confined to this bed, and this Mikos is the device to get her out of there, past it, in order to, you know, this dealing with this condition she is in, which leads to one of the greatest single endings, I will say. Halloween 4, I know you guys saw this movie when you made and decided how to end that film, because how this ends, this one is much more bold. And I'm telling you, had they ended Halloween 4, if they had taken that extra step and ended it in exact same sort of fashion, dude, man, I don't even want to say it. I will. I got to, because I got to talk about this. This girl, man, gets out of her bed, man, to protect her little brother. By now, the babysitter has already been unfortunately dispatched in one of the most grueling kills, man. Mikos takes her and puts her head in an oven, and it is so drawn out, it's so painful to just watch. But it all works well to allow Katya the time to get out of her bed. And when she does, man, the minute she's trying to get out of her room, you know, Mikos just puts his arm, almost like the scene from Anthropophagus when he puts his hand down through the ceiling. He just comes right through and grabs her, and right from there begins the beginning of the end. Eventually, your Loomis character will eventually show up to try to do his good. And there's actually the scene between Mikos and the Loomis character. I keep forgetting his name. God, Purdom plays Father. I think he's just known as Father in this. It's a great. It reminds you of Zombies Halloween when Loomis and Michael Myers are at the end at each other's throats. It really does remind you of that. Anyways, he basically deals with the father, and then he turns his attention. By now, the girl has already taken, which is a great foreshadow. Early on, we see her at the beginning of the movie drawing. I can't remember what you call them, but it's when, it's the thing that like this, and then you can just kind of draw and stuff, perfect circles. She takes this thing and, man, just plunges it into his eyes, man. And so he blinds, much like Michael gets shot twice shot in the eyes at the end of Halloween 2. So many weird parallels in this movie with that in Halloween 2. Of course, he's stumbling along around like Michael, trying to get his hands on her. And finally, at the end, when he is in the process of killing the priest, the girl picks up, and this is the cover art, right? Picks up this battle axe that had been up on the wall, man. And she goes to town. And at the very end, man, when mom and dad finally come back home and the police are with, and the door opens, man, it is one of the great reveals, man. Reveals in the sense of great ending moments. She's standing there covered in blood, man. Holding, like David and Goliath, man. Just holding Goliath's head, man. Just like, you don't have to worry, little brother. You don't have to worry anymore. I got it. And it's just like, it's so amazing. You wonder what happens to this girl's psyche after this. But it just does bring into mind Halloween or Halloween 4. At the end, when you have, what's her name, up at the top of the stairs, and Loomis, of course, like, but all she's holding on to is bloodied scissors or something, right? Which are used in Absurd. It's kind of weird. Could you imagine her up there holding her mom's I mean, obviously it's a Halloween movie, it's more mainstream, you're never going to have an ending quite like that. In fact, I'm surprised we had the ending, this idea that we actually even suggested she killed her mom or step. I can't remember how that worked there, but anyways, Absurd, man. I think it's absolutely absurd that it gets as much hate as it does. There is some great tension and suspense. Now, it may not be articulated in a way to suit a lot of people's taste, but there are moments, man. This house where they filmed in is so lavish, so huge. Just being in something so massively huge like this, it does beg a sense of dread and doom, knowing this guy, man, who is a monster. I mean, George Eastman is a big guy, is lumbering around in this house. It just adds to that sort of dread. And when things do happen, they do happen. So I don't know. Maybe I guess I'll just go ahead and stop there for episode 7, 1981, Joe Diamano's. I'll say this too. I do have one question. Film Raj, Joe Diamano's company. This company served to really help young directors sort of come into the fold, and it'll serve Michele Soavi very well in 1987 with Stage Fright. Now, Diamato's company handles Anthropophagus. It does not handle Absurd, and that is in of itself absurd. I cannot understand for the life of me what happened with. Now, I know Diamato wanted this movie mainly oriented towards the U.S., and maybe that's why Wizard and Medusa and there's another company, International something, that got their hands on this. He sold rights for distribution, but Anthropophagus ended up on VHS in this country during the heyday of the video store, moment. I almost think painfully the worst thing that did happen with this whole thing was that the decision was made not to allow Film Raj to put this movie out and then maybe let Diamano and Eastman put one more thing out there and have a loose knit trilogy that goes back to this Greek experimental island, and maybe just, I don't know what you do for a third piece, but who cares? It would be a trilogy, and Diamato, in the midst of all his other extravagant filmmaking, he could have at least contributed himself as a director a really cool loose knit trilogy. It won't happen, doesn't happen. But Film Raj is around until just slightly after 87, I think. And it will put out quite a few movies. You know, they all might not be the greatest movies in the world, but Stage Fright, man, might have been the crown jewel of Film Raj's. Well, Anthropophagus too. I don't know, maybe Anthropophagus and Stage Fright are the bookends for this company. Anyways, if you've never got Italian Horror as a reference book for the films from 1979 to 94, I suggest it is a good reference, although I do take issue with Jim from time to time, and that is the catalyst, the motivation for this series. So, from 1981, one more time, Joe D'Amato with George Eastman writing. A fun movie, man. Halloween ripoff, yeah, mostly, but it does some really interesting ideas and inverting them and pushing some concept forward that we will see in Halloween 2. And astoundingly, they're both released in October of 81, so I'm not sure how that happens, but it did happen, and it's very curious. So anyways, if you've never seen it, yeah, you ought to check it out. You ought to check it out. Anyways, till next time.